Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right into this. I want to make a firm statement right here at the very top. This is the first episode of the Ar-Rahiq Al-Makhtum series. Today, we are embarking on a massive historical explainer, diving really deep into what is arguably one of the most comprehensive accounts of the Prophet Muhammad's life ever written. I'm here with my co-host, and together we're going to set the stage. Because, before the light, there was the dawn, and before that dawn, well, there was a world of just incredible, chaotic complexity. Where do we even start with this?
Hey, it's great to be here. Honestly, to really grasp the absolute magnitude of the message, we first have to completely understand the environment it was revealed in. We're going to be your historical guides through this source material today, and we're setting up the exact world into which the Prophet was born.
To do that, we've got a 5-part roadmap for this explainer. We're going to quickly hit the book and author, then geography and tribes, political rule, religions, and finally wrap up with society and morals. All right, let's get into section 1. The book and the author, Safi Ar-Rahman Mubarakpuri. So, back in 1976, which was 1396 on the Hijri calendar, the Muslim World League hosted this massive global sirah, or biography competition, over in Pakistan. And they weren't just looking for any book. They wanted the most complete, rigorously researched historical account out there. Fast forward, out of 171 global research submissions coming in across multiple languages, first prize was awarded to Sheikh Safi Rahman Mubarakpuri from India. So every fact, timeline, and narrative we're unpacking for you today, it comes straight from this meticulously vetted, award-winning text. Moving right along to Section 2, Geography and Arab Tribes, the Impregnable Fortress. Listen, you really can't understand these people without understanding the harsh, completely isolated land that forged them. Exactly. The Arabian Peninsula was totally geographically locked in. You've got seas and oceans on 3 sides and these incredibly brutal deserts to the north. It acted like a natural fortress. It basically protected the inhabitants from just being swallowed up whole by the massive empires right next door. And within those walls, the author breaks down the complex tribal lineages into 3 distinct historical buckets. First, you have the Ba'ida. These are the ancient, perished Arabs, like the tribes of Ad and Thamud, whose histories are pretty much lost to the sands of time. Second are the Ariba, the pure Arabs, who originated from the progeny of Qahtan down in Yemen. And third, and this is absolutely crucial for our story, the Mustariba, or the Arabized Arabs. Those are the direct descendants of the Prophet Ishmael. They settled in the Hijaz region, married into the local Jurhum tribe, learned Arabic, and eventually became the ancestors of the Adnite Arabs. Which takes us to Section 3, Political Rule and Kingdoms. The political landscape back then wasn't some unified state. It was a really fascinating, volatile mix of proxy empires and entirely independent tribes. Yeah, the borders of Arabia were in absolute chaos. Take Yemen in the south, for example. It was just constantly tossed back and forth between superpowers. The Himyarites ruled it for centuries, right? But as they started to decline, the Abyssinians, who were backed by the Romans, invaded around 340 AD. Fast forward to 525 AD, and Abraha, the famous Abyssinian commander, seizes control. Then, by 575 AD, the locals actually get help from the Persians to kick out the Abyssinians, only to wind up as a Persian province themselves. So these border regions, Yemen in the south, Al-Hira in the north, the territories of Ashtam, they were essentially just geopolitical chess pieces for Rome and Persia. Right, and that is a stark contrast to what was happening in the deep desert interior. Out on the borders, you had these crowned kings who were basically vassals paying heavy tribute to foreign empires. But in the center, the tribal chiefs were absolute dictators over their own people. Their rule didn't rely on some foreign backing. It relied entirely on intense tribal loyalty, which was known as asabiyah. They led their people straight into battle, and they enjoyed specific ancient privileges, like keeping 1/4 of all war spoils, which was called the mirba. Now, the most important political evolution of this whole era happened in Mecca. For the longest time, Mecca was ruled by the Jurhum tribe, and later the Khuzaa. But then a truly visionary leader emerges around 440 AD, Qusay bin Kilab. Qusay manages to unite the scattered families of the Quraysh tribe, expels the previous rulers, and takes firm, unified control of Mecca and the Kaaba. And the brilliant part is he didn't just rule by sheer force. He actually established Dar an-Nadwa, which was basically a sophisticated democratic-style parliament for the tribal elders to debate war, marriages, and trade. Because of him, Mecca transformed into this independent city-state built entirely around religious stewardship. Okay, Section 4, Religions, the Spiritual Void. Because despite all that political sophistication we just saw in Mecca, the region was suffering a massive, tragic spiritual crisis. This is where we really have to pause and ask a critical question.
How in the world did the pure monotheism established by the Prophet Ibrahim at the Kaaba completely transform into rampant idol worship? Well, the text pinpoints a very specific, devastating historical figure for this shift: Amr bin Luhai. He was this highly respected, influential leader of the Khuza'a tribe. So he takes a trip up to Sham, the Levant, and he sees people there worshipping idols. Now, because Sham was widely known as a land of ancient prophets, he mistakenly assumes this must be a superior righteous practice. So what does he do? He brings an idol named Hubal all the way back to Mecca, plants it right in the middle of the Kaaba, and commands the people to worship it. And because of his incredibly high status, the people simply obeyed. That one act literally opened the floodgates to polytheism. The descent into superstition after that was total. It was consuming. By the time this era hit its peak, there were 360 distinct idols surrounding the Kaaba. Think about that. Literally an idol for almost every day of the year. Everyday life was just dictated by bizarre, complex rituals. They had sacrifices at stone altars, highly superstitious systems where they dedicate specific female camels, like the Bahira and Sa'iba, to their idols, making it completely forbidden for anyone to ride or milk them. When they had to make major life decisions, like getting married or traveling, they'd rely on casting divination arrows, which they called azlam. Their entire worldview was just deeply clouded by a belief in omens, astrologers, and soothsayers. Now, while polytheism and idolatry absolutely dominated, other religions did exist in smaller pockets. You had Judaism down in Yemen and up in the city of Yathrib. Christianity had a foothold in Najran and among the Ghassanid tribes near the Roman borders. And Magianism, or Zoroastrianism, was practiced along the Persian borders. But Sheikh Mubarak Puri's analysis makes a really vital point here. All these communities had suffered significant spiritual decay by this time. They had largely lost touch with their original pure teachings. The entire Arabian Peninsula was existing in what's termed Jahaliyah, which translates to a profound state of spiritual ignorance and void. That brings us to Section 5, Society, Economy, and Morals, a world of extremes. This intense spiritual darkness directly and often violently impacted how everyday people lived on a micro level. To fully explain this, we are impartially reporting the societal norms documented in the source, and honestly, they are genuinely shocking to modern sensibilities. It was a society of massive divides. On one hand, women of noble birth and elite tribal families were highly respected and fiercely protected. Swords would literally be drawn to defend their honor. But the dark reality for the general masses was brutal. The book details 4 incredibly chaotic types of marriage structures, which were essentially institutionalized promiscuity and rampant prostitution. But the most tragic practice of all was the widespread female infanticide, literally burying newborn daughters alive out of a fear of poverty or perceived social shame. It was a society that had, in so many ways, completely detached from basic human rights. And the economy certainly offered no stability. Wealth was incredibly scarce. For most tribes, survival relied almost entirely on the 4 sacred months. These were the only times of the year when intertribal warfare was strictly forbidden by ancient custom. That truce allowed for safe travel and the operation of great bustling trade markets like Ukas. But outside of those specific months, it was total chaos. Constant raiding and endless blood feuds left a huge portion of the population in a perpetual state of starvation and extreme poverty. Yet, and this is the fascinating part, amidst all this violence and scarcity, they had a legendary, almost paradoxical sense of hospitality. Just listen to this quote from the famous pre-Islamic poet Antar bin Shaddad. He says, "If I have drunk, then I am the consumer of my wealth, and if I sober up, I do not fall short in my generosity." That brilliantly illustrates how they viewed themselves. They would actually use vices, like gambling and heavy wine drinking, as ways to fund their extreme hospitality. They'd sometimes slaughter their very last camel just to feed a guest. They cared deeply, almost entirely in fact, about how they were perceived in poetry and tribal lore. To them, honor was everything. And that brings us to a really profound conclusion about the Arabs of this era. Yes, their society was filled with chaos, violence, and dark practices, but they also possessed these raw, untamed virtues. They had unmatched generosity, an unwavering loyalty to covenants, where they would literally rather die than break a promise, fierce courage, incredible determination, and a certain Bedouin simplicity and honesty that was totally free from the deceptive bureaucratic politics of the surrounding empires. The author makes a brilliant point here. These exact traits, even though they were currently completely misdirected and misguided, actually made them the perfect, resilient candidates to carry a massive new global message. They were like unshaped clay. They just needed the right guidance to channel all that immense energy.
Exactly. This dark, chaotic, incredibly harsh, yet fiercely proud world was desperately waiting for a light. They were uniquely prepared by their virtues for a profound transformation. But the question is, how does one man, born right into the heart of this chaos, shift the trajectory of the entire globe? Well, that brings us to the end of today's explainer. Make sure you follow the series and tune in for the next episode where we finally explore the momentous breaking of that dawn. To be continued.